Okay, so let's talk about number 4. Number 4, 4 cosine 2x minus pi. Whenever we have a problem like this, we want to factor out if there's a number in front of the x or the variable, could be theta. We want to make sure that whatever is in the parentheses is x minus or x plus something. We don't want anything in front. So I'm going to factor out the 2 before we go through here and graph this. So take out a 2. I'll be left with x minus pi over 2. You know, if you factored right, if you multiply through, and you'll get what you started with. So 2x minus pi would be what I would get. All right, my amplitude here is 4. Period. There's your b. 2 is your b. So 2 pi over 2, which is pi. We're going to count by pi over 4. Horizontal shift. Look at the equation after you factored out the 2. That's your horizontal shift. Remember, opposite sign of what's inside. So this is going to be pi over 2. No vertical shift. There's no number being added or subtracted at the end. All right, so we have an amplitude of 4. So what I'm going to do is just count by 1s on the y, and then I'm going to count by pi over 4s on the x. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Pi over 4 on the x-axis, pi over 4. Pi over 2, 2 pi over 4. 3 pi over 4, and pi. Negative pi over 4, negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 4, negative pi, and then obviously negative for the y-axis. Perfect, great. So amplitude 4, periods pi, and horizontal shift is positive pi over 2, and that's going to tell us where we start. Now, remember, cosine starts up high, goes down, goes up. So normally we would start here at 0 and start up high at the amplitude, which would be 4. But because of this horizontal shift, we're going to start over at pi over 2, 4. And then every point will follow that original curve. So pi over 2 is going to be 4. The 3 pi over 4 is going to be 0. And then the pi is going to go down to negative 4. So if you would like to do it more on the positive x-axis, we can continue this pattern, and that will be what you get. But you can always go negative as well. The idea is that we want 2 cycles or 2 periods of this graph. So I'm going to go in the opposite direction as well. So just follow your pattern. It does what you want it to do. It does what you think that it should do. So we get something that looks like this, and we connect the dots. So here we go, up, back down, back up, back down, and back up. Perfect. Interesting thing about this graph, this shift of pi over 2 makes it almost look like a regular negative cosine. And that's what happens in a lot of these equations, a lot of these graphs. There's different graphs could represent, different equations could represent the same graph. And that's kind of what we talked about a little bit in 3.5. So this is the correct equation for this graph, but there's another equation that could also fit this graph. Namely, we could write negative 4 cosine of 2x. That would work the same way as this one without a horizontal shift. It would start negative, it would go up and down, and it would look the exact same.